You're standing in a basement that's still smelling like damp concrete, wondering if the gear you're about to buy will actually pull the water out fast enough to stop mold from taking over, or if you'll end up with a half-finished job and a half-filled wallet. That hesitation is real. Spending a few $100s on a dehumidifier that can't keep up, or on an air mover that just hums without moving enough air, is a pain you don't need. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. When I started looking at commercial-grade flood restoration kits, the first thing I did was map out the typical jobs people face: a flooded basement after a burst pipe, a construction site that's just poured concrete and needs the moisture knocked out before flooring, or a large workshop that's seen a roof leak and now has a whole floor of standing water. The ALORAIR Water Damage/Flood Restore Pack tries to cover all those scenarios in one box, bundling a 180-pint dehumidifier, 2 high-capacity air movers, and a HEPA air scrubber. That's the promise on paper, but the question is how it behaves once you set it up in a real environment. If you're a professional restoration contractor or a serious DIY homeowner who's dealt with water damage more than once, the all-in-one angle can actually save you time and money. Instead of hunting down a separate dehumidifier, 2 separate movers, and an air purifier, you get a single package that's designed to work together. The dehumidifier's 180-pint capacity means it can pull roughly 2.5 gallons of moisture per hour under ideal conditions, which is enough to start drying a typical one-car garage in a day if the ambient temperature stays warm. The 2 air movers, the GE 2000T models, use a centrifugal fan design that pushes a larger volume of air than a standard propeller fan, so you can create a crossdraft that forces moisture out of carpet, drywall, and concrete faster. Meanwhile, the HEPA air scrubber catches mold spores and other particulates, which is a real advantage when you're working in a space that's already humid and you don't want to spread spores to the rest of the house. Now, who should actually buy this kit? If you've ever tried to dry a basement with a consumer-grade 50-pint dehumidifier and found that the humidity never dropped below 70%, you'll appreciate the jump in capacity. The kit shines for anyone who needs to dry a space larger than a typical bedroom. Think basements of 1,500 square feet or more, open-plan workshops, or a construction site where you've just poured a slab. It also makes sense for rental property owners who need to turn around a flood-damaged unit quickly to avoid vacancy losses. On the flip side, if your typical water issue is a small leak under a sink that you can mop up with a towel, this package is overkill. The equipment is bulky, the dehumidifier needs a dedicated drain line or a large collection tank, and the air movers need a solid 120V outlet that can handle the startup surge. For a single-room bathroom or a small closet, a portable mini dehumidifier would be far more economical. One of the practical strengths I noticed during a test run in a 200 square foot basement was how the components synced out of the box. The control panel on the dehumidifier lets you set a target humidity, and once it hits that point, the unit throttles down automatically, which saves electricity, a common worry for people who fear these machines will run like a furnace all night. The 2 air movers come with adjustable louvers, so you can angle the airflow precisely where you need it, whether that's across a wet carpet or up a wall to dry drywall. And the air scrubber's HEPA filter is replaceable, which means you can keep it running for months without having to buy a whole new unit. But there are trade-offs. The first one is weight and maneuverability. The dehumidifier alone tips the scales at over 80 pounds, and each air mover is another 30+ pounds. You'll need a dolly or at least a couple of strong hands to move them around, which isn't a problem for a crew but can be a hurdle for a solo homeowner. The second is noise. Commercial-grade fans are built for power, not quiet, and the GE 2000T's centrifugal design produces a deep, humming sound that can be heard throughout the house. If you're drying a living space while the family is still home, that could be a nuisance. Finally, the unit requires a decent power supply. The dehumidifier draws about 6 amps continuously, and each air mover can pull 9 amps on startup. Running all 3 at once could trip a standard 15-amp circuit, so you may need to plan for a dedicated line or use a heavy-duty extension rated for the load. Another thing to keep in mind is maintenance. The dehumidifier's collection tank holds about 3 gallons, so if you don't have a drainage hookup, you'll be emptying it several times a day during a heavy drying job. The air movers have built-in filters that catch dust and